Okay, and then we will switch to the part with our speakers. And I want to welcome on stage the guy who had a flight from San Francisco, and he's flying back. And he did it just for you guys. And this is the tonight for speaker, Jyri Engeström, who is now the director of product management in Groupon. And I think the brand tells everything. Jyri, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Give us a second to set up our presentation. Give us a second here. All right. Close your ears, plug your ears. This is going to hurt. Nope. That went well. Now let's see if we can get an image up here. Yay! Alright, the last crucial thing, never forget this, the power cord. Here we go. Works. Okay. Thanks for having me here. I landed with my 5-year-old son this morning. Your city's wonderful and sunny and warm, just like San Francisco. And you know, as you can see, I'm dressed properly for the weather, and it's lovely. I wanted to talk specifically to, well, every one of you, obviously, but specifically and most importantly to those of you who are building mobile apps. Perhaps you consider yourselves entrepreneurs, or you're considering at one point maybe becoming entrepreneurs. Because from the perspective of San Francisco, Silicon Valley, if you will, you're the people who I made this trip for, because I believe in you guys. I've been very impressed by, you know, the kind of mobile success stories coming out of here. GetJar, something that I'm pretty familiar with from a while back, and I've been extremely interested to see what you guys are up to. So please try to seek me out after this. I'm saying this now before I start my talk. And come speak to me if you're interested to work for me at Groupon. Because I'd love to talk to you. Or if you have a startup and you're looking for investors, be aggressive and you know, try to grab me. I wanted to share some of my own thinking about this app economy, if you will. There's over 25 billion apps that have been downloaded just in the iTunes Apple App Store already. And I think that from the perspective especially of the Baltics, that seems like an exciting new opportunity. You know, there's jobs, you can create business, you can create these apps that can sell in the millions, and it's all very exciting. And there's a side to this that I think is healthy, and another side that I wonder whether it's actually somewhat unhealthy. And I wanted to talk to you about those because, as you'll see, you know, this is not really a standard presentation. It's more sort of like my personal kind of moral and ethical ponderings about what we're doing. And I'm going to start with this idea of addiction, because really I think that's what's driving a lot of the so-called success stories right now in this kind of app economy. And you know, you see this especially in children. And what I want everyone here to do is to build apps, but build apps that are built with a purpose. Like, you know, a friend of mine, Tim O'Reilly, says, work on stuff that matters. You know, work on stuff that actually changes the world in a good way, not in a bad way. And unfortunately, right now, I don't see a lot of that in Silicon Valley. And it's actually part of the reason why more interested to talk to people outside of Silicon Valley because I think there's more truly innovative thinking right now coming from places like Vilnius than there is actually coming from like where people are used to, which is basically Palo Alto and Mountain View. So if you look at, like, this is the game Bejeweled that the woman who was sitting next to me on the 10.5-hour flight across the ocean was playing for literally the entire flight. She didn't once talk to me, she had her headphones on for 10.5 hours. And as I was watching her, you know, and you know how I'm cheap. I'm quite a miser actually, so I fly economy. I always get the cheapest possible tickets for these horrible long hauls. And you know, you kind of start getting drowsy, and you know, you sort of lose focus. And I started seeing these digital jewels as something completely different. And then I realized that what this thing that I was witnessing her doing was really like a fundamental primate thing, which is, you know, you kind of, you know, see these orangutans and they're picking berries, and you see a new berry and you pick that, and then you see the next berry. We're very much wired, we're hardwired for that kind of feedback loop as humans. And now that's getting applied in game mechanics to make games that are very addictive and very sticky, like what was going on, I think, with that woman. And what it breeds is what an old colleague of mine back when I was working at Google, Joe Kraus, called recently in a very influential blog post, "The Culture of Distraction." And this is you know, hitting us younger and younger. You know, I see it because I have small kids about this age. And then, you know, this is the kind of relationships that I watch people, especially in Silicon Valley, probably more than elsewhere, having with each other when they go on dates. They're actually not talking to each other, they're texting their friends or playing Bejeweled. And I was wondering if you guys were aware of the amount of, you know, SMS traffic, purely SMS traffic. This is not even including Facebook or Twitter updates. That, you know, an average, this is the average teenager sends and receives per month. It's about one message every 7 minutes round the clock, on average. And what it gets me to think is we're homeschooling one of our kids and the others possibly later too. And you know, I watch these kids in these different environments in school and some not in school and with their friends and so on. And a lot of their life, much more so, like his life, his name's Elliot, he's over there, he's 5 years old, he's my son. He's growing up in a very different world than what any one of us is growing, where these devices are pretty much the primary way to actually interact with the world for a lot of his cohort already. Anything involving purchasing anything happens on the device. Anything involving, you know, even recently was Halloween in the United States, and it was amazing to walk in the streets where these little children are trick-or-treating with their costumes on and getting candy, where almost every parent was watching their child through the lens of the camera phone, recording it. And it was this kind of like very Kafkaesque sort of scene. And my grandfather was a painter, and I recently read this piece of study where they did some tests on children who've been exposed to a lot of this media, and argued that kids weren't able to see color, not nearly as many hues of color, the color red, for instance, as kids who kind of didn't have as much exposure to media, because apparently our brain adapts and, you know, kind of numbs out. And the same for hearing sounds. If you're exposed to a lot of overstimulation, you no longer you go into the middle of the woods and you can't actually hear the birds anymore because you can't. And I just want to leave you with some of those thoughts, many of them coming from people like Joe Krause, who are very, I think, the most interesting kind of brains in Silicon Valley right now, where I think there's a lot of self-reflection going on about what kind of world we really are creating. And as I see folks like the innovators at Vilnius kind of stepping on the scene right now through the mechanisms of startup accelerators and App Camp and creating these new companies that are raising capital from Excel Ventures and other VCs. I think that what I'm looking for is like whether there's going to be a new wave of innovation that actually comes not from the west to east, but more from the east to the west, and whether that's going to embody some of the cultural values that I personally am much more interested and excited by that come out of the culture that you guys represent. And I want to talk about something that I think is an alternative story, which is a positive, very positive story right now that's going on with these very same devices and these very same apps. And I wanted to leave you guys maybe thinking, or maybe you already know, which narrative would you choose to kind of advance as you create your own careers in this space. And this story is very much about local community. I talk about technology, but I'm not a technologist by background. My own background is actually in sociology. I'm a sociologist by training. So I'm actually in technology because fundamentally I'm not interested in tech. I'm interested in people and communities of people specifically. And those translate into neighborhoods. I've had a wonderful day today walking around in sunny Vilnius, enjoying the scene and the neighborhoods here. And I saw a lot of small businesses. And this is just some of these kind of dry statistics from the United States. And what they're trying to say is, I've come to realize that these small mom and pop shops are, I think, the future. They're not the past, although many people have constructed them over the last 20 years being very much like the past. Because of the kind of world we live in, where this was a study done by San Francisco City just recently, where they came up with these kind of astonishing figures about the kind of an impact that one of these big box grocery stores put in a central location in the city would have on the small merchants, the small grocery mom and pop shops in the city. It would basically wipe out a significant portion of them, just one big box store. And this is the kind of scenes that happen when these stores close. It's just something that I picked up from the local paper. And if you go back and you think about these apps that we're creating, e-commerce, and if you look at the impact that they've been having pretty much ever since the internet came on the scene, these local merchants actually have been getting the short end of the stick. They've been getting a pretty bad deal. And what's happening even now is kind of accelerating with Amazon is a big player in the United States, specifically in the Bay Area, where they offer free 2-day delivery with Amazon Prime, which they're building these very massive distribution centers right now. There's one going up actually just across the bay from where I live. They're pretty likely going to change this into a free same-day delivery. In 2 hours, you'll get the item shipped to you for free, which basically makes it completely redundant to why bother walking down to the shop down the street when you can get the same thing delivered to you for free in 2 hours. And this is just another eBay app that recently launched, where you can see, this is the San Francisco area here. If you can see what's happening here, it's a very cool app that basically does very cheap $5 delivery. But if you look at what's happening is there's a big box store, Macy's, which is a very large department store chain, located down in Daly City, outside of San Francisco. And then there's a delivery guy that brings it to you if you live in the city. So again, the shops are sort of separated. And the kind of outcome of this is very familiar to us, and it's kind of the direction that I think the world has been going in, and that, I think the internet, and we've been kind of very much signed up to accelerate, which is a very car-based lifestyle, which is obviously, the American kind of traditional way of life since the 1950s. And the kind of inner life that we, us and our children have is a very media-saturated one because of, I don't know if you guys have seen like this Pixar movie, WALL-E. It was a Pixar movie. Where this has been kind of taken into an extreme. I think it's kind of a nice parody of, Americans in the future as these sort of oversized big babies sitting in their sort of media consoles, plugged into them 24/7. And this is the sort of direction that I think, interestingly, this is why I'm here. This is why I work at Groupon of all companies right now. Is because I noticed that sort of like when we talk about these weak signals, this is about to get disrupted, which I'm really excited by. This is where I set up our office in San Francisco, a new office for Groupon, which is a large company based in Chicago. They traditionally had a large engineering office in Silicon Valley. And the first thing I did when I joined was I set up a new office in what I thought was the most interesting neighborhood in San Francisco. It's called Hayes Valley. If you guys are ever in SF, you should definitely pay us a visit and drop by and say hello. This is one of the few areas in San Francisco where you have this kind of mom and pop stores where everybody knows each other. And what's happening now is that if you walk around the city, and I've been kind of looking at here, peeking into shops and hair salons and some coffee shops and restaurants, and seeing, do any of them have an iPad instead of a traditional cash register? And I haven't seen any yet. I'm sure there must be some in town. Definitely, if you walk around in a place like Hayes Valley right now, what's happened just this year, basically, since the introduction of the iPad, has been that every new merchant who signs up and opens a new shop is ditching the old cash registers, which cost a lot of money, and just buying an iPad and running a cash register basically almost for free on that. And the exciting part of that, this is a friend of mine, Vincent, who runs a tea shop called Hayes Tea, for instance. He's running Square right now. Hopefully he'll be running our register out soon. Is basically, it enables us to go in and start building apps to do payments that communicate across the merchant and the consumer and make this local inventory, like in his case, it's the menu of tea he serves. For many retailers, it's the items they have in their stores, visible so that we can put it into an app, very much like what Amazon does, where everybody's probably heard a lot or looked at the Amazon recommendations, where it's like people who bought this book also bought. And it's an incredibly powerful recommendation loop that requires a near infinite inventory to really work well. And to this day, that hasn't been possible to do for this kind of item level recommendations for local merchants. Hasn't been possible because their items, their inventory has not been online. It's been locked into these legacy point of sale systems, or it's been on pen and paper. But now that they're getting their iPads out and they're putting all their inventory in there, and every time we buy something, they're swiping a card or they're doing a mobile contactless transaction, we know who bought that, and that profile gets added to the item that gets bought. We end up with this incredibly valuable distributed information about what items merchants stock and then which items each individual is buying. And we can do what Amazon is doing, this kind of very powerful recommendations, except now it's not for some big box retailer that ships the stuff to you, or the local neighborhood just around you. And so that's kind of what I'm working on right now, and it's why at Groupon what we've done is in September, it's about 6 weeks ago, we launched our payments product, which means it's on an iPhone, you can start charging people if you run a store. And then about 3 weeks ago, we launched our restaurant point of sale. And restaurants are, I think, can be extremely cool because our experience of eating out in a restaurant is completely going to change because of these tablet-based point of sale systems. When you walk in, I'll show you a demo pretty soon, but they'll know who you are, if you're a VIP, what your preference is, what you like to get, and they can greet you by name. You can sit down, you can order from the table side without having to wait for a waiter to come up. And when you're ready, you just get up and go. You don't have to ask for a check or wait to leave, because all the stuff you ordered is already on file. Your credit card's on file. When you're ready to go, you just take off. And so this stuff is what I think is a much more interesting story from the story of creating more addictive games at Singo or at Angry Birds, or trying to create the next Angry Birds. Because I see it actually liberate us from technology, because you don't even have to take your phone out of your pocket. You don't even have a credit card with you. I started to forget my wallet nowadays in San Francisco because I can just take Uber, which doesn't require me to pay with cash or a card, because all I need to do is have my phone in my pocket and they know who I am. And I can pay at merchants wirelessly through my phone without ever even taking my phone out of my pocket. And this is what we at Groupon we're calling this operating system for local commerce. And it has these two parts. It has the merchant's part, and then it has the consumer part. And what I do is I'm mostly interested in the consumer experience, like the restaurant story that I just told you, or going to a hair salon, having a reservation, all that stuff kind of happens seamlessly. And so that's what my kind of responsibility right now at Groupon is. And I don't think Groupon is the only source of innovation for this. I think actually in market like the Baltics or Europe, actually more broadly, this is completely untapped territory right now. And if I was an entrepreneur here, this is probably the space that I would go at right now with my startup. Because I just see this tremendous, this is like billions of dollars of value that's kind of just waiting to be unlocked by entrepreneurs here. And I wanted to show you an example of, this is actually kind of a sucky demo, but it's the only video that I could grab on such short notice. It's by two colleagues of mine, Steven and Ulf, sitting at our office in San Francisco. And we originally did this, actually this is an internal thing, so it wasn't even meant to be shown anywhere, and I don't think it's ever been shown anywhere, and probably never ever will get shown anywhere, ever again, because it's kind of horrible, but it will give you an idea of what I'm trying to explain when I say how this consumer experience can be transformed. So I'll take my chances here and show it to you. Let's see if we have audio. Now that I've sufficiently scared you with the poor quality of this video, let's let it roll.
Hi, I'm Steven, this is Ulf, and we're working on some exciting new point of sale technologies to help better connect merchants and consumers that we wanted to tell you a little bit about.
So here's our cash register, and now as soon as a user walked into our store, we get notified of that register and see actually who that user is.
One of the reasons we're excited to be using Bluetooth 4LE to facilitate this interaction is because it helps us much more precisely locate the customer in relation to the merchant. So let's take a look at how it works. We're going to have Ulf grab his phone and leave our store.
Goodbye.
And with any luck, in just a couple of seconds, he should disappear from our register screen. Now, when Ulf comes back into the store, so now we should see Ulf reappear on the register. Hi, Ulf. Hey. And one of the things this tech allows us to do is greet our customers by name or potentially see their reward status or other interesting information about them.
Yeah, wonderful acting. I think this is, definitely one of the, less likely Oscar candidates this year in the Academy Awards, but, we'll give Ulf and Steven their hand. And you couldn't really see much of a demo there, but I hope it gives you an idea, because now what's going on with things like the new Bluetooth stack, Bluetooth 4 energy, for those of you guys that's more technical, will probably be well aware of this. It allows us to do this kind of detection, very precise. We actually know who's standing in front of who in the line, so that a merchant can, know your name and talk to you and charge you the right person. Things like loyalty that Steven mentioned there, I think is completely going to be transformed by this sort of technology, because we know exactly how many times you come to the store, what you bought, and we can give you an incentive the second you walk in. The merchant can communicate to you and offer you a special deal. Even if it's an intern who's starting, it's their first day on the job, they will know to treat you as a VIP if you are a VIP customer. And so I think that the consumer experience is really radically going to be improved by this sort of technology, and I'm already seeing it in action in some of the new products that we're testing, and I'm very excited by it. Because overall, it kind of gives you this feeling that I think technology does at its best, where you suddenly just don't, it's like a mobile phone. When first, I got my first mobile phone, it's like, suddenly it was like, wow, how can I possibly ever have lived without this? And I think that what makes this especially interesting is that not only is it a business opportunity, not only does it have a better user experience, but fundamentally what it does is it's actually reactivating these local merchants who sort of are the pillar of any sort of kind of like a civic society, actually, and which from a sociology perspective makes me right now very excited and very passionate to work on these particular problems. I've seen this happen before. My earlier startup, which was called Jyri, which some of you might remember, the old timers, which then got acquired by Google, was the early days of microblogging that nowadays is commonly status updates and tweets on Twitter, status updates on Facebook. And I think there's a risk that we end up in a siloed world where a lot of this stuff lives on a single platform, basically Facebook. All the businesses go there, all the users go there. And what I much prefer to happen was a federated world where, much like I can send email to you and you can read it, even if I'm sending it from, I don't know, maybe I use Gmail as an email client, maybe you're using Outlook Exchange, and you can still pass messages between each other. Similarly, that's kind of what the internet was built for, right? As a distributed routing system network. We should work towards a world where these different systems in a similar way interconnect through a shared protocol. So that's one of the things that the open source community in Silicon Valley is very passionate about. And typically we've had great contributions from Eastern Europe and Baltics in that space. So it's something that I just want to kind of keep in the back of your heads when you're developing the next wave of hopefully the great companies, the next Googles and the next Facebooks that are eventually going to maybe acquire Groupon or something. So I'm going to just leave off there. There might be some questions in the audience. I don't know if you have time, but I'd definitely love to address any of these things. So I don't know if you have time for questions. Yeah. Any comments or questions in the audience? everybody seems dumbfounded. I'm good. One hand. Thank you. When is Groupon coming to Lithuania, sorry? Groupon. Yeah, well, Groupon's already in 48 countries, and I don't even know which European countries are on the list and which aren't. So I can't actually answer that question clearly, except the way that I look at it is Groupon now here. and I'd love to work with you guys. So if you have a startup or an innovation that's somehow relevant to what I just talked about, then let's get together and let's figure out if we can work together. I think that would be a much more interesting world than, whatever. I think you guys already have plenty of daily deals points. My sense of it is that the daily deals business, as lucrative as it is going to transform by virtue of the point of sale system basically becoming the nerve center for all of these local merchants that they operate from their tablets into something that looks a lot more like dynamic pricing. For instance, like on an airline. When you buy the first seat on an airline, it's typically a lot cheaper than the very last seat. And that's kind of yield optimization done in a way that it's not really always a good example because I hate the way airlines make that not very transparent. But I think that the daily deals is eventually going to transform into something that looks a lot more like this sort of an automatic, like kind of adapting dynamic pricing that merchants can then take advantage of to generate more demand. Yeah.
How do you discover your devices in your application?
How do you discover those devices? In the demo. Yeah, so it's the new Bluetooth 4 low energy stack that doesn't require the kind of old school handshake that you used to have to do with things like Bluetooth. It's kind of cool. So it's very effortless and simple to do. iPhone 5 and iPhone 4S, by the way, are the only mass market devices out there. A couple of Android devices. They're very new devices. Basically every new device rolling out right now has it, but the older devices aren't capable of doing it.
So, does it work? So, does the user have to have your app the customer, does he have to have the app installed?
Yeah, that's a good clarification there. Like in this demo, yeah, you're gonna have the Groupon app installed on your phone. You don't need to have it active, but it has to be on the phone in the background. Yeah. Good thing, whatever, I don't know, like 50 million people, it's a ridiculous number of people have the Groupon app. It's like one of the top 25 downloaded apps ever. I just checked this morning. So a lot of people happen to have that app. Yes?
You have been talking about addiction and stuff. Do you think your application creates some sort of addiction?
Does the application that I was showing create addiction? Good question. Yeah, so it's well, I might just kind of like pulling the rug from underneath my own feet here. Possibly, yeah. Like one of the things that I'll give an example that we built out as a prototype was, well, you can basically give like a slot machine to a customer. Every time they walk into a store, they get a free spin on a slot machine on their phone, see if they win anything, as a way to have stores attract customers to return back more often to see if they win. And then once they're in the store, the merchant can upsell them on something. So there's definitely ways to leverage the same technology in this kind of addictive loops. I think my general point that I was trying to make here is more about kind of using this technology, developing mobile apps that pull us away from screens and sitting in front of screens all day and get us out into the street and actually interacting with other people. And I think that can logically, like a friend of mine from Nokia actually, who I just met on a plane on the way over here, Christian Lindholm, is developing like a wearable wristband that basically allows us to do the exact same stuff that I just showed there, without actually really having a screen. So, possibly we would end up in a world where payments and a lot of this kind of stuff could happen without us having to like constantly doing this and actually just kind of seeing eye to eye with other people. That'll sort of what I was trying to do. All right, one final question.
Which is the second best market to launch a mobile application after the United States?
Second best market to launch a mobile app after the United States. Well, what I think, like, what you should do if you're launching a mobile app is launch in the US, and then oftentimes the biggest, like the most significant way to get additional downloads, additional traction to the app, is to very quickly ship localized language versions in the large languages. So actually look more at the large languages. So languages like Spanish, German, French, somewhat also like in the Asian languages, but like in the few companies where I've been investor in and I've been watching the traction grow, that's oftentimes been the most powerful way to get traction, even more powerful than getting featured in the US App Store and so on. So what I would look at is a very quick way to make a very basic local language version, because then Apple is much more likely to also feature you in those local app stores when the app has a language version that markets own language. Okay, one more question back there.
Okay, the last one, sorry, I think it's not the most pleasant topic to bring on, but I was just really curious. I keep reading in the news that Groupon is not doing that great, and the share prices is dropping, and the price is less than $3 per share now.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is a point of sale product will help you out to get out of this downfall? What's your strategy?
Right. Yeah. This is a good question. So like the Groupon share price is totally tanked, as by the way has its peers. Like if you look at Facebook and seeing they're kind of like the two Groupon peers. So the short answer is yes. Like when we launched this point of sale stuff, the share price bounced up like double-digit %. So it was nice. It's the first time like I've been in a public company where we do like a little launch and it has such significant impact on the share price. And I definitely think like the Groupon stock personally, like for me, like it looks like it's probably at least not overvalued as it is, considering all the stuff we're doing, and then comparing it to, I don't know, like the valuation of our competitors like Square or whatever. But honestly, like I don't even know what the Groupon share price is. I don't look at that because it doesn't really matter to me. It's sort of like an extraneous thing. Obviously, that affects the economics of the company, but ultimately, it's kind of like if you look at like the Amazon curve from like when Amazon first launched and peaked and then kind of tanked, and it took them like whatever 7 to 10 years to get to their current valuation, and it kind of grew slowly. It's kind of to be expected that there's a slump, but then if it ends up executing well, if we end up being able to actually ship this stuff and make it work, I'm pretty confident that it will end up having a positive long-term impact also on share price. All right, one more. Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch anything you said, but I think what the question was like, isn't this kind of a privacy violation because, if merchants are able to see all this personal information about their customers, then, who on earth would ever want to share all this information with all these different random merchants you walk into, right? Yeah. And the answer is exactly. So what you want is first of all, to not share anything that isn't actually serving some real value to the consumer. So, for instance, we need a face and a name if we want you to be able to greet your customers with their name and know who they are. You also need that for things like pay with card on file. But you don't need any additional information in addition to that. I think the key point there is to make it very transparent to users what they're sharing, make everything opt-in, never assume that people are just going to do it. Always ask them before have them switch something on, and then give them controls for what they're sharing. So, fundamental, it's kind of like this, classic slogan about or a quote about if you're writing a play, and you're writing the script for a play, and you decide to put a shotgun or a rifle on the mantelpiece above the fireplace in the scene, then at some point during the scene that gun should go off. Somebody should use it, otherwise it shouldn't be there. So the same thing applies here. I think that you don't want to put anything in there that could, be possible personal, privacy violation ever, unless there's a reason why a user would want it there, because they get better service, they get some kind of value out of it, and the user has to make that choice. I'm very familiar with these from when I was at Google, studying Google social efforts, and I actually left the company because I was in partial disagreement with some of the choices that they made. Launched Google Bus, for instance, which then sort of ended up backfiring. So I think there's definite risk there, and it's not always clear initially when you launch something, because you could just not have perceived something happening, which then kind of catches you by surprise. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's very important. And I think Google is actually probably one of the better examples of this, if not the best, in Valley, where you reach out to the privacy advocate organizations in advance of launching something and show them the product and get them to test it out and give you feedback on it, because they're oftentimes the hardest. They will attack it and then find out all the faults in it, and that way you don't end up shipping something that hasn't gone through some kind of external review from a professional privacy advocate beforehand. So that's something I would really also recommend to any of you guys working in this space, is to keep, institute a process like that, especially if you're a larger publicly listed company. All right, thanks. I think we are moving.